Well, hi, I'm Ben Felder with the Oklahoman here in the Oklahoman's video studios, and joining me today is Labor Commissioner-elect Leslie Osborn, also former representative in the legislature. Commissioner-elect Osborn, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I say you're a former representative, so that job is now in the past. The new lawmakers have come in. You've won the election for Labor Commissioner of this statewide race. You'll take the oath on the 14th, so you're kind of in this in-between period.
I'm in limbo right now. Yeah. So yes, we have about a 2-month period where you move everything home from your office to the garage and you do a little shadowing at the new agency and you try to start, learning the ropes, but you're not official until the day we're sworn in.
Yeah, so that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So people may be saying, Labor Commissioner, I've heard of that. I'm not sure what it means. I see that signature in the elevator sometimes. So real quick before we get into kind of some of the things that you want to see done in your new post, how would you describe this role as Oklahoma Labor Commissioner?
Well, I'm the same way, but when I came into the legislature, I would have assumed it was all labor issues. And I think it was prior to Right to Work's passage. But right now in our state, we have a lot of the union and non-union groups that work together very well on most issues. We don't have a lot of that animosity there used to be. There is a wage and hour division, there's a child labor law division, but the vast majority of what the Department of Labor does is safety for our citizens and safety for our workforce. And most people aren't really aware of that. So the programs that we do and proactively go out into public sector and private sector businesses offering free consultation services. How do you keep your employees safe? It'll lower your workers' comp rates. It's an added benefit. And then things that we do that just making sure if you take your son or your daughter or whatever you have to an amusement park, that it's safe. That somebody's riding in the Devon elevator and going up 50 floors, that it's safe. That somebody is making sure on asbestos abatement, that somebody is out there working with the contractors. Are they doing this in a proper manner to keep their employees safe? We have a lot of those type divisions, and what's been really pleasant for me is in this interim period, I've been shadowing each division, just kind of listening and learning.
Yeah, we were talking earlier. Your agency has is kind of one of the most unsung connections between government and the public. And you may have some on the extreme right of the spectrum who would say the role should be to get out of the way as much as possible. Those on the other side that would say no, we need to be more involved. You described yourself as a person in the middle. Talk to me a little bit about just kind of the political aspect of this position, or the partisanship, whether it exists or doesn't, and then what do you see your role in as Labor Commissioner here?
Well, I think that I'm always a person that tries to say, slow down, make sure you have all the data before you jump in and make a decision. So one of the first things I learned at the Capitol when I was in the legislature in my 10 years was we would always have cleanup bills, and it's like, what's a cleanup bill? Well, that's a bill that somebody ran in a prior year that sounded really good at point A, but they didn't think about the ripple effects of B, C, and D. Constant cleanup. So I've always been somebody that said, let's think about all those repercussions, let's slow down, gather the data, make sure we're doing it right. So there's a lot of people who would say, why are you out checking any of these things? Well, because somebody needs to. Yeah. I want to know that if I send my kids to something, if I know somebody's going to be riding in public access elevators, if my kids are going to OCCC and there's a lot of boilers there, that somebody's checking those things, and there's a reason that we do. Almost all of those things have had a tragedy in the past, maybe not in Oklahoma, but somewhere else. And if we can do something that checks them without being onerous, that's the main key. A lot of the things we do by going in proactively as a state keep the feds out. It's something we do where we're not onerous with the fees and fines, but we instead are working with instead of against public entities and business. That's the goal of the Department of Labor.
Yeah, I mean, for someone, coming from a newsroom environment where when there is a disaster, a catastrophe that happens, one of the first things you look at is was this inspected?
Exactly.
Where were they at on this front?
Exactly. So I know I heard last week that there was something with a scaffolding that was on the side of a building in Tulsa. So even though I'm not there yet, I'm immediately, texting. It's like, no, that is a different venue because it was on the exterior. It's not in it's not in this cordoned off inside elevator. So but you just never know. Yeah. Somebody else, a federal entity, was in charge of checking those things. Yeah.
So you talk about the kind of inspection part of the job, but there's also in some ways a licensure aspect. You've heard a lot in recent years about licensing reform. Governor Fallon has talked about the need to maybe review the licensing process and what positions have licensing. Some of that work is already underway. Tell me a little bit about that and kind of where do you see yourself?
It's a new and different role, and I think it's exciting. So about a year ago, a task force and now a board was set up with the Commissioner of Labor being the chairman, and it was to actually compile a database, and that's been done. It took about a year because we have so many different licenses for so many different occupations, and a lot of them are sub-licenses, maybe different types of electricians to whatever that would be, engineers. But that being said, there was no central point in the state where you could type in, I want to be a, what will it take? Now, at the Department of Labor, there is a completed data site you can go to and type in any single occupation and find out where to go, who to contact, and what it will entail. That's beautiful. That was step one. Step two now is to do a deeper dive. We are supposed to, according to the law that was passed, every 4 years you are supposed to be checked. So what does that mean? About, I think, 75 licenses are checked every year. Are they too intrusive? Are we going too far in a government entity of a barrier to entry? Or are there some things that we're not doing enough? So for instance, when I always use an example, if you just got out of jail for an embezzlement charge, we probably would prefer that you weren't working in a title agency with grandma's closing fund. There may be a reason that we step in and say that might not be onerous, that might be reasonable for public safety. We're not sure that every grandmother in the state's going to know to check with some central database. Is that being onerous? I don't think so. But if you had a check kiting charge 12 years ago and you'd like to go into plumbing, that may be okay. We may need to say, you know, that not a felony conviction for this many years, or you would be willing to say a felony conviction, but would you take random drug tests? And that's the thing, is just doing the deep dive on the data, making the recommendations to the board, having open hearings, and once a year making some recommendations, not mandates, recommendations to the legislature on what might be a good idea to go forward. All of it started because of justice reinvestment, making sure that we didn't have barriers to entry for people that wanted to turn their lives around.
Yeah, such an important role in this larger conversation of criminal justice reform that we're talking about right now.
Absolutely.
With some of those examples that you gave. Tell me a little bit about your ideas with workforce development. Maybe not traditionally, you know, the central role of the Labor Department, but something that you've said is going to be important to you. It's
real important to me because it's the one thing I kept hearing in every county that I went and spoke to. So for a year, you're on the campaign trail and you're speaking in Godebo one night, Woodward the next. I've been to so many towns that I had seen on a map but never been to before. Drove myself to all those 45,000 miles on the car. But it was great. It was exhausting, but it was great. But the one thing I heard is I tried to stop. If I was going to go speak to a chamber, I would try to set up a meeting with some businesses in the area because I wanted to talk to them about their footprint with the Department of Labor. Consistently, at almost every business of every type, from high-tech aerospace jobs to trailer manufacturers and welders, workforce development. We are having so much trouble finding a qualified workforce. Yet, if you'll go to the schools, you'll hear about kids that graduate, they're not sure what they want to do. They go get a degree in letters and they're working at Starbucks as a barista. Where's the disconnect? So I started digging on that, and it really seems pretty siloed with different state agencies, different nonprofits, with the actual private industries that need the jobs. So that being said, I would love to be the person that actually worked on bringing a lot of that together. Not all run through the Department of Labor, but a resource that a business to a kid in junior high, working all this together to put that together at one place to have a footprint of where do you go to get what you need.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Yeah. And finally, you know, I want to ask you, given your experience as a former representative, chairwoman of the A&B committee, I mean, you still are an elected official or about to be sworn in as an elected official, but no longer a part of the legislature.
Right.
I'm just kind of curious your thoughts from the outside looking in now. You know, we talked about your chairmanship and, you know, probably maybe one of the toughest times to be chair of the Appropriations and Budget Committee. You were saying before, kind of jokingly, is, you know, it's going to be a lot easier now with more money coming in.
Right.
And just kind of, what's your perspective going into this new session as you look at this new legislature coming in? I mean, just what are some of your observations as we come into 2019?
We made some really tough decisions in those years. And obviously, like I jokingly said, my timing is not good because the year I was Appropriations and Budget Chair, the worst budget crisis in state history, $1.2 billion shortfall in a balanced budget state. You've got to make the cuts. You don't have an option. We made the tough decision to raise some revenues at the same time that we've been making cuts. Because of that, we are now a better funded government. So I just saw a Wallet Hub just put out a national data after all the bills that were enacted in 18. Where is your state on overall tax burden? We're 45th. That is not too high. You will hear a lot of people say they passed the biggest tax increase in state history. They did this, they did that. 45th is not too high. What it means is that we will be able to provide a better cushion of what state government needs to be. So for instance, I hope with this $612 million surplus, and some of that's spoken for on things like bond payments and ad valorem reimbursement to the counties and things like that, of course you want to save some. We've already built the rainy day back up to $450 million. It was almost depleted. That's beautiful. But take this $600 million and invest it in pockets that change your trajectory.
Yeah.
Oh, I would have loved to have been able to do that the year I was there. But we have some things that are so sorely lacking that change the future of your state. Mental health. I would give a huge chunk of that to Terry White, who is a fearless advocate for doing more to catch people young. If you catch them here and you start the needed therapies and medications before that's a high school dropout, before there's incarceration, before there's multiple children in DHS custody, but before Section 8 housing, before food stamps, fix it here, not just for the dollars, for the life. Look at prison programming. Joe Albaugh, another one, the fearless advocate for prison reform. Actually make sure that every prison in the state has substance abuse and mental health counseling, GED attainment and job training. Change the trajectory of the future. The people in our prisons didn't grow up like you and I. They need someone to show them a different path and to believe in them. Rural health care access. We're always 47th to 50th in all these indicators. All those health centers we closed when there was the trauma at the Department of Health that have not been reopened, those people aren't going to primary care. They're going to emergency rooms. They're having problems that exasperate to horrible things. Change your future with buckets, classroom sizes, but don't just grow government. And that's where I think we have an exciting time. For the appropriations chairs, for the Speaker of the House, the Pro Tem of the Senate, the Governor. What an exciting time to have those kind of decisions to make instead of bleeding out.
Yeah.
So let's make sure we don't start cutting taxes again. And let's also don't raise revenue. Let's take a deep breath and try to do the right thing in the middle again.
Yeah. Well, maybe a better fiscal climate headed to the legislature this year, but there will be challenges, as there always are. Challenges in your job, no less, but maybe you get a chance to kind of be a spectator and enjoy the show and not have to be quite in the middle of it so much anymore.
Yes.
Well, Commissioner-elect, thank you so much for your time. Good luck moving forward.
Thank you.
Once again, Leslie Osborn, Labor Commissioner-elect, will be sworn in on January 14th with other statewide officials, including the new governor. I'm Ben Felder for the Oklahoman. Thanks for joining us.